Imagine this scenario. You're on a secure military base, a place designed for safety, where suddenly you're facing a deadly threat from within, and you're unarmed. That's exactly what happened, incredibly, just recently at Fort Stewart in Georgia. A soldier allegedly opened fire with his own handgun, but then something remarkable unfolded. Unarmed service members, his colleagues, confronted and actually subdued the shooters themselves. Right there, right then, their courage would have prevented a much worse tragedy.
Absolutely saved lives. This whole incident, it forces us to ask some really tough questions, doesn't it? About military readiness, about personal protection on base. Why are our soldiers sometimes left
And yeah, the surprising reality of combative training today. Okay, so let's unpack this moment. August 6th, 2025. Fort Stewart, massive base, right? Yeah. East of the Mississippi, the largest army installation.
That's right. And in the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team area, Fleet 8 Cornelius Radford, he's 28, allegedly opens fire, uses a personal 9mm handgun.
And the immediate aftermath.
Well, 5 soldiers were injured initially. The good news, thankfully, is that all are stable now, expected to recover. I think 3 needed surgery, but 3 have already been released.
That's a relief.
It is. And what's really striking is what the Brigadier General there said. He noted that other soldiers, quote,
immediately and without hesitation, tackled and subdued Radford. This was fast, within minutes, before MPs even arrived.
Wow. And they had no weapons themselves.
No.
Identified as the first one to actually tackle the suspect. And Master Sled Justin Thomas was right there assisting him. Plus, you had Staff Sled Melissa Taylor and 4 others rendering critical first aid to the wounded. Just incredible composure under fire, really.
Really remarkable. So, for this kind of bravery, facing a direct threat like that, what recognition did they receive?
So the 6 soldiers who were directly involved in either subduing the shooter or giving that immediate aid, they were awarded the Meritorious Service Medal, the MSM.
Okay, the MSM, what does that signify exactly?
It's specifically for outstanding non-combat meritorious achievement or service. And that classification, non-combat, is, well, it's a significant detail. But it seems his command didn't know about an arrest back in May for a DUI. That detail came out later. His father also mentioned, apparently, that his son had been trying to get a transfer and felt he'd experienced racism at Fort Stewart. But the official motive for the shooting, still unclear. It definitely involved his own coworkers, though.
This whole event, the heroism is undeniable, but it really throws that spotlight onto the gun policies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How could soldiers be unarmed in that situation? Let's get into the rules.
Yeah, it's a major point of discussion now. The Department of Defense policy is, well, it's very strict. Military personnel are prohibited from carrying personal firearms on base, period, unless they get specific written permission from a senior commander.
So no concealed carry permits or anything like that applies on base?
Nope. If you have a personal firearm, say for hunting or going to the range, you have to check it out as secure storage, use it for that sanctioned activity, and then checks right back in, promptly.
So who is typically armed on a base day to day?
Generally, it's the military police, the MPs. They're the ones providing the armed security presence.
And what is the official justification for these tight restrictions?
Yeah.
Even for trained soldiers.
Well, experts like Robert Capovilla, he's a military law specialist, argue it's fundamentally about protecting national security.
Okay, how so?
His point is that these installations often handle top secret information, so having a generally armed population on base is seen as
undesirable from that security perspective. The visible presence of armed MPs, he argues, is the intended security layer.
He thinks armed soldiers wouldn't have prevented them.
Soldiers be unarmed, and that's led a lot of people to ask, well, why can't service members carry for self-defense on base? And there's another wrinkle. The policy doesn't really regulate gun ownership off base. So if a service member lives off post, it's relatively easy for them to own a weapon and potentially bring it onto the installation if they ignore the rules.
And it sounds like there might be a gap regarding mental health oversight, too.
That's a huge complicating factor. Legally, it's...
Okay, let's go back to the awards. The Meritorious Service Medal given to those soldiers is high praise, clearly, but you mentioned the non-combat aspect. Can you unpack how military awards differentiate between, say, service and direct combat heroism?
Sure. So, individual decorations are for various things. Valor, outstanding service, achievement, heroism. The decision often involves some subjectivity from the commander, focusing on what that individual did.
Right.
The MSM specifically recognizes that outstanding achievement or service.
But the key phrase is typically non-combat conditions. Now, you can get an MSM in a combat zone, but only if the service itself wasn't directly combat related, like, say, logistics support under...
Is there something that could have designated as happening under hostile conditions?
There is, actually. There's something called the C device C for combat. It can be added to some medals to show meritorious service performed under combat conditions, meaning direct exposure to hostile action. But, critically, the C device is not authorized for the MSM.
Ah, okay. So the regulations just don't allow that specific combination.
Exactly. It's quite specific. For comparison, you have the Bronze Star Medal, the BSM. It's often seen as equivalent in precedence to the MSM, but the BSM is specifically for service or achievement in a combat zone under combat conditions. Hostile action is sort of baked into the BSM itself.
Got it. That clarifies the distinction. And what about something like the Purple Heart? How does that fit in?
The Purple Heart is unique. It's not really subjective in the same way. An individual is entitled to it if they meet the criteria, basically, being wounded or killed as a result of enemy action, a terrorist attack, even certain friendly fire incidents, as long as the wound needed medical treatment and was officially documented.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, thinking about how these soldiers responded at Fort Stewart unarmed, relying on physical intervention, it brings us to combatives, or hand-to-hand combat training. How common or proficient is this in the regular military today?
Yeah, this is a fascinating angle. Generally speaking, for most conventional forces, the combatives training they receive is often described as pretty weak at best.
Really?
Weak. Often, yes. It tends to be limited. Maybe some very basic
Brazilian jiu-jitsu moves, focusing mostly on grappling. The assumption is, if things get physical, especially with body armor involved, it's probably going to end up on the ground.
So the thinking is just...
Absolutely, and that's the paradox now. Special Operations Forces, the SOF community, they're the big exception. They get much more extensive, sophisticated, close-quarters combat training, including empty hand techniques. But look at recent conflicts. Even with all the advanced tech, we've seen reports of hand-to-hand fighting. Think about the tensions on the Sino-Indian border, some situations in Ukraine, even Israeli forces operating in tight Gaza tunnels. It shows that when firearms as primary tools are neutralized
or just ineffective because it's too close, these fundamental skills suddenly become critical again.
So it's not just about the physical technique itself, is it? What else does this kind of training offer?
So if it's so valuable, why is it often underutilized, as you said?
Well, several reasons get cited. Sometimes there's just not a strong forcing function, meaning junior leaders aren't consistently required or incentivized to make it a priority. Things like COVID-19 also disrupted training rhythms, and honestly, getting really proficient takes significant time and consistent practice.
Are leaders sometimes hesitant to push it, maybe if they aren't experts themselves?
That can be a factor. Two common reasons
mentioned are a simple lack of knowledge about the program and its benefits, or sometimes, maybe pride. A leader might worry about looking incompetent if they're rolling on the mats with their soldiers and aren't.
Yeah, it's the Army's big combative tournament. It helps keep the skills sharp and valued. At the end of the day, the message needs to be, soldiers still have to be ready to engage the enemy at a range of 0 meters.
This whole deep dive into Fort Stewart, it's really driven home the incredible courage of soldiers acting decisively, even when unarmed. It shows that bravery and quick thinking can make all the difference, even when policy might limit other options.
It really does.
And it's clearly sparked, or maybe reignited, these crucial
conversations inside the military about gun regulations on base, about individual defense, and about the place of fundamental skills like combatives in modern soldiering.
Absolutely. We've
as combat remains unpredictable. How does the military best prepare its people for everything? How do you ensure they're protected by policy, but also empowered with all the necessary tools, including those basic fundamental